Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Fifth Child podcast, the weekly podcast episodes where I give you two recommendations for either a video game, movie, anime, entertainment-based, or television series. I'm your podcaster for today, Chris, and I just want to say thank you again for listening to the next episode. If you like what you see here, remember to like, comment, subscribe. It always helps out. And again, to help make this channel grow further beyond just this podcast, always feel free to go down in the description below and check out my Patreon as well. Any little bit that you have a month helps, and it just helps if you like what you see here and you want to be able to see a little bit more different content from me besides just this podcast, any little bit helps. So as I have been saying for these last few or so episodes, they've been shorter episodes as usual. They haven't been the longest episodes possible. That's mainly because like I've said, I've been busy with work, and I've been trying to prepare myself because in this next coming episode, there's actually going to be a huge episode just dedicated alone to Fire Emblem the Three Houses for the Nintendo Switch, the newest game in the Fire Emblem series. I was going to probably dedicate the entire episode to just that video game. So it's going to be a much longer episode because, like I said, I'm probably going to have a lot of thoughts on this game once I finish it or once I get a good chunk of it done. I already have some thoughts on it already. So I just want to go ahead and make sure that I have as much of that episode dedicated to it as I possibly could. So with that, we're just going to go and just jump right into the content. So I have two different recommendations again. I have a video game and I have a movie. Or not a movie, I have an anime. So the video game for today's podcast is actually a independent game by an independent game in the Shantae series by Wave Forward Technologies that was released for the 3DS, the Wii U, Xbox One, PS4, PC, and also the Nintendo Switch. So the Shantae series is actually a series I never got into as a child. The original game came out for the Game Boy Color back in the day, and honestly, I'm not gonna lie, it didn't really interest me because back during that time, I was a really boyish kind of guy, and a game where you played as a girl did not really interest me. Fast forward to now, and I don't care. If the game is fun, I will play it. I don't care if I play as a boy or a girl. So now, fast forward to now, and I'm trying to play more of the Shantae series. And the game I played for this podcast episode was released, is actually the third game in the series, I think. That was released in the series. I played the Nintendo Switch version. It occasionally goes on sale. I got both this and the last game in the series, Shantae, Half Genie Hero, but we're going to talk about Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. So Shantae and the Pirate's Curse for just the general story of it. So the main character, Shantae, is a half genie, half human main character, and from what I can understand in the previous game, Shantae lost all of her genie powers and is now trying to come to terms with no longer having her powers. So in this game, the Shantae is now actually fighting against a demon, some sort of demonic army, while fighting alongside her long-standing rival, Risky Boots, the pirate, this pirate lady. Who's lost her entire pirate gear and is now contracted Shantae to help her go across the land and help find her gear while also fighting against this demonic army led by the evil pirate master. So that's it for the story. There's really not much to it. I don't want to go too long into the story, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about the concept of Shantae. Shantae is a side-scrolling Metroidvania-ish kind of game. I want to say Metroidvania-ish because there's not a big interconnected map to the entire game. The entire game is basically focused on 6 different locations where that you kind of go sequentially through each and every location, and you get more of Risky's pirate gear, and the more you get in the different pirate gear, it allows you to go back to previous areas of the game and find new unlockables that you couldn't quite get the first time. It's a platformer where Shantae can jump around on different platforms. Her main attack is that she uses her hair to whip. She uses her hair to whip her enemies into submission. And you as you go throughout the game, you get more money that you can use to buy unlockables, which make it so you can whip your hair faster, so that you can, so that her hair whip gets stronger. You can also gain different weapons. You get different unlockables that lets you use a dodge, that lets you use a double jump, that can let you use a floating kind of ability as well. And the general scope of this game is that it's Metroidvania in the aspect that the more of the gear that you get, the more of Risky's pirate gear that you get, the more chances you have to branch out in these different locations, and get different different unlockables that you couldn't find before. I can't really say too much about. There's really not much more about the gameplay I can really say than that. So I'll go ahead and jump into the graphical style. The graphical style is sprite work. It looks pretty decent. From what this game was originally on the Nintendo 3DS, and it's only been slightly upscaled for the Switch, but it still looks decently good. It gets the job done. I don't really have too much to say on that. The music is actually done by. The musical composer is Jay Kaufman, who's actually done a lot. He's actually done a considerable amount of other games as well, besides the Shantae series. He's done some of the American Silent Hill. He's done some of the American Silent Hill games. He actually recently helped out with Bloodstained: Ritual of the Night, which I just heard recently. Probably his best credit I can think of is Shovel Knight. I think Shovel Knight has one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in a long time, and I definitely think that the soundtrack for Shantae is really good. I can't think of any soundtrack titles itself that really stood out, but every single area has its own different theme to it that does kind of lend itself to it certainly does lend itself to adding uniqueness to every single new area, and it definitely fits. The fire kind of island has a kind of a fiery tone to it. The swampy level has kind of a swamp level theme to it as well, and the music does add a certain uniqueness to every single level that I do think adds a lot of enjoyment to the game. In terms of how enjoyable the game is really, really fun to play. The controls are very, very responsive. It's definitely satisfying once you get more and more upgrades to go back to previous levels to get more unlockables. For example, you can get these things called heart squids. If you get 4 of them, kind of like the heart containers from a Legend of Zelda game, you can then go back to the heart squid smith in the first town, and then you get more and more hearts. Another thing that you have to do throughout the game in order to get the true ending is you have to beat these enemies called Tinklebats, or Tinkerbats. There we go. Who have this dark magic within them, and the more dark magic that you get, you can then ultimately get the best ending in the game when you're fighting against the Pirate Master and the final boss. So it's definitely important to go back to certain areas in the game to see what else you didn't get. If there's any flaw I can think of Shantae, is that it's very vague with regards to what you need to do next. Unlike some Metroidvanias, there is an actual map to the game itself. It's not very detailed. It's not as detailed as other Metroidvanias in terms of what you have to do. And every single town you kind of have to talk to. You kind of have to talk to every single NPC you find in order to get general hints of what you need to do next. So there is a little bit of time fluffery going on there that kind of distracts you from the actual fun of the game, which is the platforming. So that does kind of hamper the gameplay experience a little bit. In terms of actual difficulty, the game can get a little bit difficult at times, but it's always manageable. Probably the hardest part of the game is the final dungeon, where some of the platforming just gets too ridiculous for words and made me want to throw my Switch against a wall. But I was able to beat it, obviously, and obviously that was an obstacle I was able to overcome. But if you're not used to the platforming, and if you're not used to all the gear that you get, that final dungeon can be a bit of a kick in the pants, and especially and the rest of the game can get that same way as well if you're not staying up to date on all of the unlockables that you need. So definitely always make sure that you stay on top of your unlockables. Definitely, you always have to make sure that you go back to previous areas of the game to make sure you get what you need to in every single level to progress. So with that, I think that's all I can say about Shantae. It's a pretty short game. I think I finished in about 7 or so hours. I actually haven't gotten all the Tinkerbats yet, so I didn't get the best ending of the game. I got technically the bad ending. But I would definitely go back to the game in order to get all unlockables to 100% the game. It obviously doesn't take that much effort. I just wanted to play other games when I got done with it, because obviously I got this podcast I got to do. Excuse me, and I have to get ready for Fire Emblem and the Three Houses, because that game's going to take up a lot of my time. So I definitely give Shantae and the Pirate's Curse a big recommendation. If you haven't played any of the Shantae games and you have current generation consoles, I think this is probably the best place to start off. This is the best place to start off. I think I might pick up Shantae Half Genie Hero at some point once I start running out of other games I need to play. So I give a big recommendation to this game. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into the anime for today's episode. And the anime for today's episode is going to be That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. Yes, that's the name of the anime. So That Time I Got Reincarnated by a Slime was a anime that actually aired in October of last season, and actually just recently ended. I think the last episode aired sometime around May or early June. The anime itself was produced by 8-Bit, which I've never heard of them before, and I thought, and they did a pretty decent job with it. The anime is currently licensed by Crunchyroll and Funimation. So if you want to watch the subtitled version, you can watch it on Crunchyroll. There is a dub version that's been dubbed by Funimation that hopefully we'll get a video release for soon, that I might actually pick up. That's been dubbed and licensed by Funimation. So if you want to check out the dub for it, definitely check out Funimation if you want English. And the actual anime itself is based off of a light novel series that's still ongoing. I haven't actually read the light novel, but I might pick it up at some point in time. The light novel is currently being published by Kodansha, and it's currently still ongoing. So the overall story of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime tells a story. First starts off with an average Generation Xer office worker by the name of Satoru Mikami, who's a super boring office worker who then gets stabbed to death in the middle of the streets of Tokyo by a passing robber. And then as he's dying, he makes all these different requests. It's actually super funny. He hopes that no one finds his porn stash on his computer, and then he finds himself in another world, and he gets reincarnated as a slime who has the ability to devour other creatures, other monsters, and then he gains their abilities. And in the very first episode, he runs into a demon known as Veldora, who then gives him a new name. His new name is Rimuru Tempest, and Rimuru the slime absorbs Veldora's abilities, and then the entire story of Slime is just basically Rimuru building an empire, getting more and more creatures and more of their abilities, and just starting off things from scratch in kind of a video game like world. It's very much like Shield Hero and Overlord. But while Shield Hero was kind of a little bit overly serious, and while Overlord was a little bit funny with a little bit of a serious undertone to it, That Time I Got Reincarnated by a Slime certainly has a much more tongue-in-cheek tone to it. that I definitely appreciated. The series is extremely fun and enjoyable. The main character, the main character himself, Rimuru Tempest, is a very, very genre-savvy kind of character. He certainly knows that he's in a video game-like world, so he takes advantage of that multiple times. And he always tries to find the best way to survive in this world, in order to how to get the best abilities and how to use those abilities. And then eventually along the way, he runs into other characters who he then basically recruits into his army. He recruits these different orcs, he recruits these different orcs, these different dwarves into his army. He gets into scuffles with the different militaries of all the different kingdom. He gets into some of the politics of it. And in general, there's a lot of world building that goes on in this first season that's really interesting, and I'd like to see that get explored more in a second season. In terms of the art and animation for it, the overall animation is fantastic. I've never heard of 8-Bit Studio before. I have no idea what else they've done besides this, but they certainly have done a great job with it. Most of the action sequences throughout Slime are extremely fluid, really well animated, and it's some of the most exciting fight sequences that I've seen in an anime this season, which is kind of a detriment because later, around in the last third of the series, there's a little bit less fight sequences, so the anime does kind of lose that a little bit. But it's also in the service of the world building of it. So I think on a rewatch, and then when I get to see season 2 and I get to see exactly what else the series does with itself, I think I would definitely enjoy it more and enjoy that world building much more as I go through more of what the series is about. I can't really say too much about the music because there wasn't a lot of standout tracks, unfortunately. I thought the music did its job well, and it did exactly what it needed to do. So I can't exactly say too much about the music. So let's go ahead and jump right into how fun is this series. This series is a lot of fun. Like I said before, it's really funny. It has its tongue firmly placed within its cheek. Rimuru Tempest himself is a great main character. You'll probably notice in most of the official art style that he has a human form to him. You don't get to see that human form until much, much later in the first season. For the most part, he's just that slime, and it's really great how much emotion is emoted by the voice actor for Rimuru. And it's also great to see him just basically build up his empire. It's very, very similar to the other series, Overlord. So both Overlord and That Time I Got Reincarnated by a Slime, and also Shield Hero, are part of this genre known as the isekai genre. The isekai genre is just a genre where a normal average dude in normal average everyday life gets somehow transported to this magical world, and they have to use the smarts that they have in their normal everyday life in order to either survive or just build themselves up in this story. And there's a lot of similarities between the main character. There's a lot of similarities between Rimuru, the main character in Slime, and Momonga, the main character of Overlord. Both of them are trying to build up their empire basically from scratch, given the resources that they have. More so Rimuru, because he just starts off as a slime, and he just has to get more and more abilities. He has to make more and more friends. He has to make more and more servants and allies that help him build his empire further. Some of the more enjoyable aspects of the series, and some of the interesting parts in the series is when it does get a little bit more serious. There's definitely some politics that go on in the series that Rimuru does get himself caught up in, that I definitely do find enjoyable, and I'd like to see much more of that because the series does do a little bit of world building. If there is a detriment to the series, I'm going to go into some light spoilers as to what the last third of it is. You eventually find out that Rimuru is not the only human from everyday life who got transported into this world, you find out that there have been more and more humans. You find out that there have been more humans from modern day Earth, or not modern day Earth, but real life Earth, that have been transported into this everyday life, and Rimuru tries to connect with them. He then finds out that a lot of these people are just children, who are actually taught in a school by another main character known as Shizu, who has been trying to teach these kids how to survive in this new life, given the new abilities that they have. And then Rimuru ends up actually becoming the new head of this, actually becomes the new teacher of this school. And that's interesting, but unfortunately it does pivot from what the series was about for the first 2/3. The first 2/3 were mostly about just Rimuru making his empire stronger, while also dealing with the politics of the different kingdoms and also the wars going on between these kingdoms and other demons. So the shift in story does come a little bit out of left field, and it kind of drags the rest of the series along. And unfortunately, this is where the season ends. The season doesn't necessarily end Rimuru's story with any kind of hook to what exactly the next season is going to be about. There's another part, though. The very last episode in the series, not counting the recap episode, is actually a different subplot that's much more interesting than whatever's going on here, and honestly, I want to see more of that subplot. So I'd like to see what they do with that, but as far as where they take Rimuru's story in the last couple episodes in the series, it's not that interesting. So unfortunately, the series kind of ended on kind of a lesser note than how it started, and that's why this season alone kind of falters a little bit for me. But then again, like I said, there is going to be a season 2. It's in production. It's coming out in 2020. So another season that kind of picks up that story and actually intertwines it better with the overall story, I can definitely start looking at it as a bigger picture. But if I look at this season alone, it does certainly bother me a little bit, and it does detract ever so slightly for me, that I can't give this the highest recommendation. But again, this could easily be fixed by a season 2. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out today's podcast episode. A slightly shorter podcast episode. I do apologize for that, but I wanted to make this. My time is unfortunately running short, and I have to get these episodes recorded a little bit more in advance. So there's 2 recommendations that I've given for you guys. I gave you Shantae and the Pirate's Curse for the Nintendo Switch and other consoles as well. And then that time I got reincarnated as a slime. You can watch that on Crunchyroll or Funimation dubbed. So thank you so much for watching this episode. Again, I do apologize for some of these shorter episodes. I apologize for this episode being so short. But like I said, my time's running short, and I have to prepare because there's going to be a much bigger episode somewhere down the line with Fire Emblem and the 3 Houses. So I thank you so much for listening in, and if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, please like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you so much for listening in. If you want to see this channel grow even further, please feel free to subscribe to my Patreon, and anything you have a month certainly will help out grow this channel more. I thank you so much for listening in, and I hope to see you guys in the next episode.